Six pack Lapadat. We got Gabby Martinez, and I was just saying, Gabby. So you are coming up towards your 10th year powerlifting, which is crazy for somebody your age. And I was just saying how previously, so I started powerlifting in 2008. And back in the day, this is before like, I don't know, like Instagram wasn't, I don't even remember when Instagram started, but people weren't, if it was around, people weren't on it. Facebook was like 2006. So, I mean,
Yeah,
this is like Facebook was relatively new. Like, this is way back in the day. And to find powerlifting around then, you had to like just know somebody by chance in the gym that powerlifted. There
exactly.
was you wouldn't find powerlifting otherwise. And nowadays, you hop online, on social media. Like if you just follow fitness or you're into weightlifting, the algorithms are gonna be like, hey, you might like
Mhm.
Gabby Martinez, Russell Orhe, Leah Bavoil. And people are like, oh shit, I do like that. And then boom, you're in powerlifting. But back in the day wasn't the case. Now you started in 2014.
Yep.
How did you find powerlifting?
So I've told this story quite a few times. So if you've ever met me, I've probably told you. But my high school coach was around when USAPL was first founded, like before it was even called the USAPL. I
Oh
can't
wow.
remember the names of it back in the day in the 80s, but yeah, he was actually my assistant principal, and he was also our powerlifting coach. So afraid of him on two different counts. But he walked up to me in the gym one day, and I think this was at a point in high school where I was kind of struggling, having a hard time, and I didn't really have anything where I just like fit in. I was always just kind of trying to force somewhere to fit in at the time. And he asked me if I would be okay with throwing on a squat suit and just doing a meet that was in the gym. And I was like, no, absolutely not. That looks terrible. But yeah, I was a little afraid of him, so I agreed to do it anyway. And then that was pretty much it. So my introduction was mostly because I think he kind of knew. I don't know how he knew, but I think he just knew that that was something that I'd probably stick with long term.
Like, were you already squatting and lifting on your own then?
Absolutely not. No. So at
Whoa.
um, my high school, like they did not want the girls in the weight room. Middle school and high school did not want to do it. They let us go in there like maybe once or twice a year in the off season, so definitely not in season either. And I was kind of like a well-rounded athlete. I did basketball, volleyball, softball was the other. If I hadn't done powerlifting, I would have gone and done softball in college. So
Oh wow.
yeah, the couple of times that we did go in the weight room, they had like set weights for us. So like just do squats, and they were not, I'm sure, to depth at all. But I was like, no, this is kind of easy. I was like, let me just put some weight on. So I was starting to rebel a little bit even then, and they were just like, I don't know what to do with her. So maybe he heard about that and he thought that it would be a good fit. But
It
yeah, no,
sounds
I
like the
started off not
50s.
doing anything.
It sounds like the 1950s. That they would be like, oh my God, there's a crazy if they would I'm surprised they didn't accuse you of being a witch and tried to burn you.
It might
Like
as well have.
so that's crazy where it's like she's trying to add more weight. I don't know what to do with her. It's crazy. She's ambitious. Lifting weights. This is I've never it's crazy that they're thinking like that. So
Yeah, I think they were like, you're gonna get hurt. Like, we don't want all these other girls to also add weight. So
oh
like just
my
keep
God.
the weight on. So I would just like sneak a 10 on or something.
And they probably thought they were being chivalrous by looking after you, don't get hurt.
I'm
When in
sure.
reality, it's like, you're not protecting me. That's the
Yeah,
biggest is
no,
like,
I was super
you're not a
rebellious.
hero here. Yeah, you're
That was
not,
around
you're
the
holding me
time.
back.
Yeah, that was around the time I think I was trying to push them to let me try out for football too. I didn't end up
Oh my
doing that because
gosh.
I ended up liking volleyball, but I was like, these guys are like scrawny, and I was like, we're not even as scrawny as them. So like, I don't know why you don't just let us outlift them. It's motivating.
And I was gonna say, like, how many of these dudes now you'd probably be outlifting? I don't know if you like know any of them anymore
No.
from back in high school. Yeah. But yeah, how crazy is that? So you were saying, um, and you had spoken about this on your social media, and I had to like look this up. So your coach thought this might help you, and et cetera, and you found high school very difficult, you were saying. And you had said on a previous podcast, I saw a clip that you were neurodivergent.
Yes.
Oh, well, can you explain what that is and how that affected you early on as in finding powerlifting and how that changed things and et cetera?
So this is something that I've relatively recently learned about of myself, which is kind of why, I'm trying to talk more about it because I wish that I had known about this when I was a kid. So I've likely probably been on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, for my entire life. But as a girl, girls tend to be a little bit better about masking, and so we can like mimic other girls to be more, normal and just like fit in a little bit, which I think I kind of mentioned when I was talking about high school too.
Mm.
Um, so I think that that's something that kind of pushed me into the sport of powerlifting because it's very hands off. So I'm somebody that has a lot of very specific like irks, I guess, that I'm still kind of figuring out and trying to figure out how to work around them and stuff, like especially for meets. Like competing for me is very difficult, and accepting the fact that it is kind of difficult and that I need to just kind of accept it and then figure out what I can do to work around that, which I think worked pretty well at nationals this year. But it's something that made it very difficult for me to find like an area of life where I just fit in. Everything I think outside of lifting has just kind of been, what do I need to bring today? How do I need to act in order to fit in for this particular event or for this group of people or whatever it is, which is kind of hard, especially when, it's exhausting. And the fact that I have a home gym now is like really cool and stuff too, because I don't even have to do it at the gym, but it's pretty new. So I know I got some backlash recently on Instagram for mentioning that I'm autistic. So personal
Why would you
space
get
for me might be a little bit more,
why would
I
you
might
get
care more about
backlash?
personal space, huh?
Why would you get backlash? That's crazy.
Yeah, it was on for the American Pro. So the spotters on deadlifts were like very, very close to the lifters. And I'm well aware that for untested lifting, there is a much higher risk of, passing out or whatever. But like for me, my initial jerk knee reaction was like, oh my gosh, like I would be so uncomfortable. But I wanted to disclose that it's like I only probably feel that way because I have that very specific like irk. Like that would bother
Yeah,
me and it may not bother anybody else.
that's
So I
fair
had people
enough.
saying like, well, if you're autistic, you probably see somebody, so you need to know that like you need to mentally prepare. And I was like, well, I've known for probably 5 months now, so still learning, still getting there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Are
it's
you did you sorry, did you have you heard Leah Babla's story? Are you
yeah. So
familiar?
I think when she was starting to talk about it on Instagram, I had, I didn't really research it at that point. I was just like, oh, there are different presentations of this. Because I know in like movies and stuff when there are autistic characters that aren't like they don't say that they're autistic, but you like if you know someone that is autistic, they're like, yes, this person's autistic. That's why the show is great or whatever. I was very heavily identified with those characters. And it makes it makes a lot of sense now, but I think lifting is really analytical, so there's a lot of rules, which helps me kind of figure out where I fit, where I don't fit, like what's okay, what isn't okay. And with things like basketball, where it's very flowy and like you kind of have to just react as you go, I did okay with those types of sports, but even like softball is a little bit more hands off. It's a little bit more individual, and powerlifting is an individual sport,
Mm.
which I think has just made it a really easy place for me to stick. And it's also part of why pretty much all other aspects of my life kind of revolve around it because it's just so easy to fit into. But I don't know if I would have ever even brought it up to my therapist if Leah hadn't posted about it.
Really? Holy
Yeah.
I mean, and that just goes to show why it's like great that you talk about it as well because people are going to hear. I remember so Leah Bavoil 2019 I had her on the podcast. And this is like before Leah Bavoil became like Leah Bavoil now, right? Like the queen. And she was a bronze medalist at the IPF Worlds. Sam Calhoun had came in silver and Carola Garra came in gold. And I had Leah Bavoil on the podcast. And this is really when like the first time we started hearing the Leah Bavoil story. She wasn't like everyone like what she is now. She had been on I think that was probably her first podcast ever. And she talked about how because you can't tell just by looking at somebody. You can't and even in interactions, like I've known Leah now for years and you hang out and everything, and you can 100% just straight up forget. Like you don't get it. And she was trying to explain the trials and tribulations she had growing up. She knew she was different, but her
Yeah.
own friends and family didn't understand why. And whether she would have like certain meltdowns or blow ups or whatever, people would just be frustrated with her, or and she'd be like, which doesn't help anything. And she'd be, I don't, they'd be like, why are you like this or whatever? And it'd be, I don't know either, right? Like it's like you feel this, and she said, you so when you don't have an explanation and people do look at you like, why are you acting like this? Why is this happening? And you have no explanation for them. And these are people that are like friends, family that you trust and super close with, who don't understand you and be looking at you
Yeah.
like that. So she would have moments, she said on the first podcast, like she went through bouts of, depression, suicide, thoughts of suicide, and like I'm never going to fit in. I'm never going to find someone who accepts me for me. You when you don't know, you think like, how is anyone ever going to take me as me? How is anyone
Yeah.
ever going to like, am I just like difficult? Am I, what is this? And until, so she for a long time felt that she was just exactly that difficult, weird, whatever. And people don't realize, like, to your point, when you're talking about like the spotters being super close, it
Yeah.
would be like, look at, it'd be things that for other people would be weird and you wouldn't understand, but it would make her or certain people incredibly uncomfortable,
Yeah.
incredibly like, I can't do this. Or just to go through a day acting like as though everything's normal would be incredibly exhausting. And the whole nine. And she was trying, she was explaining this. I remember in 2019, I don't it was still fresh to me. And I think to a large extent for people who might be listening, it's difficult for us to understand because they will talk to you and be like, you look entirely like everyone else to me. Right? They
Yeah.
won't get it. You know,
Yeah.
um,
And I've
yeah.
had a lot of people say like, "Oh, you're just overthinking things. Like you're not autistic. There's no way." And I haven't gone through the full assessment yet. So there's usually comorbidity. So if you're autistic, there's some other things that you deal with also. But the reason why I even started seeing a therapist was because I thought I just had severe general anxiety. I thought, I was just really anxious in social situations, and I was like, I want some strategy so that this isn't so hard for me. Because when
Mm,
I'm at meets, like I want to say hi to all of these people, but it's so stressful, especially when I'm judging beforehand. And judging before a meet helps me so much. It like exposes me to the environment, but it's so difficult. And especially now that I'm learning more about it, because everything that you detailed about, feeling alone and I mean, I work in a lab that studies autism, or I'm doing my thesis in a lab that studies autism. And the definition of autism, if you break it down into like the root word, it means alone. So the fact that
what?
that's kind of the experience that all of these people who have later diagnoses have, it makes a lot of sense to me. But it just makes everything difficult. And it's not that I don't want to participate. And like, especially like being in public and like the spotters being really close or things being really loud and cool at like USAPL meets now, like it's cool. And I understand that a lot of people love that, but for me, it's very difficult and it's extremely draining. And I have a theory
Mm,
that trying to pretend that things don't bother me had drained me so much that by the time I got to deadlifts, that was actually probably why my deadlifts weren't going well. It probably didn't have much to do with, peaking or anything. It was just that like mentally I'm having to make everyone else feel comfortable, or like I don't want to tell people that I'm uncomfortable. For me, that's almost as worse than being, I don't want to bring attention to the fact that things that I'm experiencing are a little bit different too. So
mm.
yeah, everything you said just like nailed it on the head.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, even if like I've been to competitions where if I'm too like aroused during squats and bench and I'm too hyped, and this is like not the same. This is like I just understand what you mean if I'm too hyped for squats and bench and I'm getting myself too riled up. And whether you're like playing the music, got the caffeine through your veins, and you have that adrenaline dump. And then
Yeah,
by the time deadlifts roll around, you feel gassed.
yeah,
That's just like normal. You've had your way too much adrenaline and etc. And you've had adrenaline dump by the time deads rolls around. Now augment that by like 10 or whatever that you might feel where it's like, look, I can't even control it though. It's not even like calm down. It's one of those deals where my surrounding environment has me peaked like that.
yeah.
Um, yeah. And so you were going through high school like this. And it's you just realized, like, just recently within 5 months, actually, you've not even just high school, like your whole life, though.
Yep.
in we've watched you at USAPL Nats and you had no idea. Like you must have inklings, but wow, how much of a relief is it to, because Leah talked about this as well. It was the finding out that all of a sudden made everything a lot easier. And did you find that as well? Does it make it easier now that you're like, okay, this makes sense?
I I think it took me about a week, maybe 2 weeks for it to like actually sink in. So I had mentioned that, I think one of my family members is autistic. I think I'm a little bit like them, but like it didn't click in my head. And then my therapist told me like, well, maybe you might be too. And it took me until my mom sent me a podcast of someone that had a PhD in psychology who didn't realize she was autistic until she was in her 40s. And then she was
Holy
talking about some of
smokes.
her experiences and it hit me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what's been wrong with me the entire time. And it's not even that something is wrong with me. This is just how people experience things. Like it's not just me. And
Yeah.
I kind of wish that my family had known about autism, like more mild autism when I was a young kid, because there were some very, very, very obvious like signs that yes, this kid has, this kid, the way that this kid's brain works is a little bit different. And in high school, I think if my high school coach hadn't come up to me and asked me to put a suit on, I don't know if I would have made it out of high school, if I'm being really honest. There were some
Really?
things going on around that time that it could have gone either way. So I will forever be grateful for the fact that he pushed me into the sport and that the sport existed at that time.
You think powerlifting essentially saved your life?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
How how so? If you don't like growing up and entering high school, which is difficult, like high school can be difficult regardless. I can't
Yeah,
imagine if you're dealing with this on top of that. I mean, if you meet how many 13, 14 year olds entering high school already feel awkward, shy, and like, oh my gosh, overwhelmed. Like I remember entering high school feeling that because you're a junior, you could be 13, 14 with kids who are look like seniors that look like adults.
yeah,
Dudes are shaving, people are getting drunk on weekends. And you're like, oh my gosh. Now couple that if you're autistic but don't know it.
yeah.
And
It was difficult.
that's probably an understatement. I mean, that's um, that would be petrifying.
Yeah, it was rough. I drank a lot in high school. There was and I'm an army brat, so I think every time that I moved as a kid, I was always like, okay, what's my new personality going to be? Like, what am I going to pick in order for me to fit in and make friends? Um, and then when we got stationed in Texas, when I was in, I think, fifth grade, so I was in Texas from fifth grade to graduating high school. So I didn't really get to adjust that and kind of fix it, so to speak. So, like, when things would pop out or I would have a meltdown, or, people just thought I was being difficult. They were like, why is
Mm,
she acting like this? And I didn't really have an answer for it. And I think that's one of the things that I personally struggle with is I don't know when things are actually bothering me. I just get kind of irritated and then a meltdown happens. So I'm having a hard time identifying, when I'm starting to get irritated. So in high school, I just had my entire existence was just kind of like me trying to hold everything in so that I didn't let things leak out, if that makes sense. And I feel
mm.
like with powerlifting, I don't know if it was just the group of kids was like it was just a better group of kids that were experiencing similar things, or if I was just more comfortable in that type of environment and I just didn't have things that were bothering me as much. But yeah, no, it was rough. Middle school was okay. It wasn't until high school where there were a lot more social dynamic things going on. And it's not like I don't understand social cues and all of that. I'm not that kind of autistic. It's more so like the way that my brain processes things is a little bit different, and people don't really understand like how I come to certain conclusions when I see an interaction. But it's not that it's an incorrect, way to look at things. But I definitely ask my friends. I'm always like, is this normal? Especially
Mm.
now, because it was difficult. And I think in order to cope with all of that, I didn't even know why I was so upset all of the time. So I was drinking a lot. I was going out to parties a lot. And it could have very quickly gone pretty bad. So I got very, very, very lucky that I found the sport when I did.
Leah, I mean, your story echoes so much Leah Bavoil's. She said, yeah, like powerlifting saved her as well. It's crazy that like you could feel like that and then later on find powerlifting and now you're like a powerlifting champion and you're successful. You obviously you coach now through powerlifting. I've seen like Leah, like you can imagine how many people show up at some of these, like whether it's a fitness expo or the IPF World Championship, Sheffield, and all how crazy things get around. I've seen like how crazy things have gotten around Leah, and I've seen it affect her and have these like a meltdown or something like that, and she will refuse to leave though. She could pull herself aside, gather herself
Mhm.
afterwards, and re-enter
Yep.
and continue on. And you want to talk about the fucking heart of a lion? Like, there's no worse feeling than like anxiety is a terrible feeling. Anxiety is like one of the worst feelings you could possibly have.
Yeah.
And to have like high peaking anxiety in not knowing what's happening, not knowing why it's coming, and to have that meltdown with thousands of people around. So you're pulling yourself aside. And when you re-enter that room, everybody's going to be looking at you because you're Leah Bavoil. In that room, it's a powerlifting room. So, and because who you are, you can't just blend in with the crowd. You're going to walk back in there and everyone's going to be assessing you and looking at you.
Yeah.
And for her to be able to do that, it's like, it's incredible. It's freaking incredible. And like previously in life, she would think like, I'm weak, I'm whatever. And now when it's like, you got heart like nobody's got heart. Face that kind of anxiety and hang in the fucking pocket and re-enter that
Yeah.
room. So I mean, that's hard. The Leah, the Leah Bavoil story. And that's why, like, I'm glad, like, she's out there and she freely, openly talks about these things. And same with yourself. And she went through like tough times in high school, and talked about how, you know, am I ever gonna have a boyfriend? Am I ever gonna have like who could fall in love with me and love me for me when I'm so like in her mind's eye, it was just difficult.
Yeah.
But she wasn't just difficult. She wasn't difficult at all. It was her, as you put it, this is just her experience. This is happening to her. It's not her choosing or just whatever,
Yeah.
being stubborn. It's happening to me right now and whatever. I have to deal with it. Um, so yeah, when you talk about your high school experience and in drinking, like essentially a lot of people do self-medicate, whatever it
Yeah.
is. You try to find something and hopefully you could self-medicate by trying to get by. Like for you, was it, look at, if I'm drunk, maybe it's easier, or maybe I don't
Oh,
feel.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like when you're drunk, things are like dulled. So nothing's hitting
right.
you quite as hard and you can just sit and relax. And I
Yeah,
I did that a lot in college too for a little bit. Um, at least until Raw started taking off and I left college because I think college was just so much different types of like stress all at once and I was just getting burnout over and over and over. And specifically not from lifting. Like I think I tailored my degree and all of my jobs and where I lived around the fact that I needed to train at certain times. So, and also like I extended my degree. So I changed my major and extended my degree a semester so that I could go to collegiate nationals in 2021, just one more time, after 2020 happened. So yeah, I don't know if that was a smart move, but it happened. So we got through it. But yeah, powerlifting has been, I realize that it's been something that I fixate on. And I know that other people are like, that's probably not healthy. Like, why are you getting another degree in something related to powerlifting? Your job you're trying to have around powerlifting, you have a home gym, like you never leave it. But I think for me, it's just kind of like that constant source of this is something that I'm choosing to do and nobody's going to have expectations of me that I'd already have for myself. And at meets, like you said, Leah, like leaves to go collect herself and then she comes back. That was something I had to do with the Arnold this year.
mm,
But because everything was so loud, like I could feel the music even when I had my AirPods in and I was blasting it. Like I could feel everything. And I had such a hard time this year. And because of that, if it's going to be in CPOT again, I probably won't go back just because I don't want to, that was pretty difficult. And I had several strategies in mind for like how to get around the fact, because the Arnold the year before was in the middle of the convention center. So it was really loud, but everything was really open and there was a lot of space. At this one, it was very, very closed and dark, and like there were so many flashing lights, and I just had a hard time. So when I actually got through to nationals this year in September, I that was after I was like, okay, so I'm autistic. I know I have these things. I don't know exactly what affects me necessarily, but I know that these very specific things, like things being too bright and flashing in my eyes and things being entirely too loud, that bothers me. And when people walk by and don't give me space, that bothers me too. So at nationals, I said, you know what? I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to ask for things that I need in the moment. And if people aren't going to give it to me, I'm just going to go get it. And I think it actually worked really well. That's the first time I've had like a third deadlift attempt move that well in quite a while, especially for like a national level meet. So I think being selfish, it may not make everyone super happy around me, but I think for me, especially if I'm asking for things like just don't talk to me, I think that that's pretty reasonable versus like asking everyone to like lower the music at the entire meet, which I almost kind of wanted to message the national office and say like, can we keep it at a specific decibel? Because like if it bothers me, I'm assuming that it bothers at least someone else at the entire national meet. Because like it's a big nationals and it gets pretty loud. And if there's already people yelling at us and Gino's yelling, and you know it's hard to hear judges, and it's just a lot. But I think so far I'm figuring out some strategies that make competing easier. So I am excited for that too, though.
I mean, also to an extent, you're taking a bit of control, which probably helps. I mean that helps for most people. It's when you don't have control that anxiety can come, and then augment that a lot more for someone who's autistic, I'm sure. Um, what were some of the things that like you asked for? Like honestly, saying don't talk to me or whatever when I'm at there, that's totally reasonable. There are people who just period like to get, in the zone, so to speak. But yeah, I would. What are some of the other things that you think you could take control? Also, by the way, let me throw this out there. Yeah, I think if someone says cut the music when I go out there, I don't think that's a big ask. As a matter of fact, I think it's some people likes like I want you to play this song when I go out there.
Yeah,
Okay, for me, I want this song on. Okay, for me, I don't want that song on. Okay, like it's all the uniqueness. I think that's good for people to have unique people to show up. And if you come out to a specific song or you come out to no song at all or whatever, I see powerlifters come out there and ask the crowd, like, bring it down. I think Joy Namani does that. And some people come out saying, hype it up, let's get going,
yeah.
yell at me, whatever. But I like a variety and different personalities, different people, whatever coming out. That's what powerlifting is. We have like so many different people in our sport. It's
Exactly.
what makes it good. But yeah, so what are some of the things that can help you that you can ask for?
So there were two really specific things that I wanted at nationals this year. So I had two handlers. I actually hired Kyle Miller from Project Strength. He was the numbers guy. I was like, I have my own attempt spreadsheet. Like you can put it onto whatever attempt spreadsheet you have. Like I trust you to do the numbers. Like we'll just do it. I'm fine. And then I had my boyfriend Mikey was my second handler because we were only allowed two for prime time. And I told Mikey, I was like, your only job is to basically keep everyone from talking to me, like at all. Like I don't really know how I'm gonna feel when I get in there. I'm pretty nervous. Like I had to actually cut, I think a kilo. And I was like, I'm like, I don't know, and I just want to focus on the lifting. Like I don't want to have to, put the mask on and like be really bubbly to talk to, Jen Thompson,
Mm,
and I don't want to make her feel like I don't want to tell her to go away and make her feel bad. So that was his job. His job was to do that, and I had a blanket also. And my fault on bench. Um, I think another thing that's not necessarily common or uncommon with autism, like you have a hard time noticing like sensory changes. So for bench, I usually like I'm physically shivering and I don't even realize that I'm cold until I start to get warmed up again for deadlift. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that's why. Most of the time, I just kind of guess that it's like a blood sugar thing. So I'm just like eating candy, but that's not necessarily what I need. So I had a blanket with me at all times. I kind of forgot on bench, so I had the blanket, but I was still kind of cold, and I probably should have been walking around a little bit. So that's something I'm probably going to try out this time, especially when nationals is in March. Although it's in Reno,
Hmm.
we'll see if it's cold or not. If it's cold, expect me back there with like a comforter or something. But those were really the only two things that I had. And then I had some headphones because it was a much bigger venue, so the music it didn't feel as loud this time. But I was actually really worried about the lights, which is why I have lights like in my garage back here, and purposely why I have them like flashing when I train, because I don't really get to control how they want to do meat production. So I can ask for them to lower the music, but I'm not going to ask them to like alter the coding that they have for the lights for the meat. So I'm just going to try to get myself used to that. But temperature is something that I can control. Like I can take hand warmers if I need to, and then Mikey will probably always be the guy to just tell everybody to go away for a second.
That's actually a relatively tough job for him because he's
Yeah, I
towing that
know.
line of he's
It's a good thing I
constantly
don't have
throughout
to
the
fit
day
him.
making yeah, he's constantly throughout the day like making up excuses or trying to interject with a story or something like, hey, without trying to come off mean. But I know you meet like Jen Thompson, someone that you compete with, as well as like Sam Calhoun, and you don't want to come off like standoffish or any
Yeah,
kind of, it's like, look, this is not that. So, and some people, even when they're competing, period, don't like to talk too much like a Taylor Atwood or whatever because he's uber competitive. And for you, it'd be like, no, it's not even that either. Like some people would think, no, I understand, Gabby. I'm like that. I get really competitive and I don't like to. It's like, no, it's not even that though. It's like,
yeah,
no, you don't understand. You're projecting on to me what you heard from other people. This is entirely different and unique that you won't know. And I could see where it'd be like, look at, don't take this the wrong way. However, talking about it helps. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
anyone who listens to the podcast would be like, I got you. She's not, this has got nothing to do with me or our relationship as competitors. This is just how she prefers to be, period. But yeah, it's the thing with powerlifting too, is it something to the effect of because it's numbers driven, analytical, there's in what is it you think about powerlifting that brings you, because you were saying I it makes sense that you were saying how like basketball's too free flowing, too many possibilities, options, it's here, it's there, it's everywhere, etc. Where powerlifting is like you put in your attempt selection, you come out, the bar is loaded, you have 60 seconds, it's a whole lot more rigid, so to speak,
Yeah,
in that, and everyone has their 60 seconds, nobody's in front of you trying to take the bar off your hands or whatever, right? There's no defense, right? No defensive play in there. But what was it about powerlifting that you were like, wow? And do you think not only is it easier to do, but actually does it bring something to your life that's like, I actually enjoy this, brings ease and peace when I think about it? Is it actually a plus, not just I can do it, it's something I can do?
yeah. So I don't think I actually started thinking about that until recently. But I think powerlifting is because I tend to get fixation. So like I find something like when I made the dresser that I have upstairs, like that was all I did for 2 weeks. But powerlifting is something that I fixated on pretty quickly in high school. I was like, oh, like you do a meet, you go train, like you see the immediate results of what you just trained. So and it can be instantaneous feedback where like, you get the lift, you feel good, you get, endorphins, all of that good stuff. But there's also that long-term aspect. So I think the problem that I tend to have is that like I get really into something and then boom, something happens and then boom, I'm on to the next thing. But with this, there's so much that you can put into it. So even though I have such like a large bandwidth for being, really passionate about something specific, like the bandwidth for powerlifting for me just like keeps getting bigger. Like there's just more things that I can put energy into. So there's never any burnout of like I've done everything that I can do with this, like it's on to the next one. And it was kind of similar with softball. But softball, I think there was just too much of a team aspect, and powerlifting, there is still a team, but I think the people that are just drawn to powerlifting are, at least for the most part, in my experience in the communities that I've been a part of, are a lot more tolerant of some of the things and some of the boundaries that I like. Like, I don't want someone to talk to me while I'm lifting. Like if I yell at you before I try to pull 500, like they're not going to be that mad about it later. Whereas if I'm yelling at someone before I bat in softball, like they were going to get really mad at me for like an entire week and say, why is she so rude? So I think just like the fact that there are people that are way more similar in powerlifting as far as like, they're just more tolerant types of people. But I don't know if it's just necessarily that it's analytical. I mean, I do really like numbers. I'm not like a statistics kind of person. But I think looking at the numbers, it makes it a lot easier to understand long term. So like when things were going pretty rough over the summer with my training, and I think that's actually part of why I'm a lot more efficient as a self coach than if I have a coach, because it's hard for me to kind of communicate some of the really small details that I want fixed or that like I want to adjust. And when I do it myself, like I can just kind of play with it, and then if it just feels good, I just roll with it. That's
Mm,
pretty much my entire self coaching experience has been trial and error and just kind of figuring out what just feels good. And I don't know until later if it's actually scientifically based or not. Usually it is, and that's why things feel good though. But I think powerlifting is just, it's routine. So like with softball, like yes, you have softball practice every day or whatever it is. You have basketball practice every day, but it's different. Like every practice is different. When you're
mm,
training, it's the same workout every single week, and there are very small details that change. So it's like the weight changes every week. But the workout itself, how long it takes, your warm-ups, all of that is exactly the same. And for me, that's extremely comforting. So I don't know if it's the numbers specifically or if it's just the routine, and like maybe weightlifting would be similar or bodybuilding or whatever. But powerlifting just feels good. Like just hitting a squat and, PRing on some sets or whatever, that just feels good. And it's something that the better I get at coaching and identifying some of these patterns, like the more often that happens. And I'm almost 10 years in and I'm still PRing pretty regularly with things. So if PRs stop occurring, I think it'll just be that I'm really comfortable in the routine that I have, where I train every Sunday, I train every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever it is. So it is comforting. I think it's probably just the routine, but also the fact that PRing and doing certain things just feels good to have that accomplishment done.
you were actually talking about, I seen a video clip and you were saying how some people it becomes like monotonous or they get burned out by doing the same thing all the time over and over. And you're like, that for you that like that for like from your point of view, that for you that is difficult for me is comfort.
Yeah.
And for you, you want to like it's a grind. For me, this is satisfying, this is relaxing, this is why I like it, because it is stable and the same thing over and over. I know what Tuesday is.
Mm-hmm.
I know what Sunday is. It's every Sunday. And for some people to hear that every Sunday for here on out is going to be, they'll be like, oh, fuck. For you, it'd be like, okay, good, good.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. I know what my Sunday is from here on out. Perfect. Less intangibles, less things moving around. All right. And yeah, isn't it like you essentially you found your calling,
Yeah,
to
it feels like it.
yeah, and to be coaching yourself. I mean, have you worked with another or first off, before we get into that, also you had mentioned how I didn't even think about that way, but it's true when you have like softball or basketball or anything like that, training or any kind of practices, they do change. Yes, we have practices every Sunday. Yeah, but from the different scrimmaging to drills to whatever, everything changes. And then the different personalities and interactions as well. It can be huge. Like you have 30 people on a team, all these different personalities, some people loud, some people whatever. And for someone like yourself who has to deal with the changing every Sunday's practice could be different, all these different personalities and how heated people can get and emotional people can get. I can see where it could be challenging. Whereas if it's just like you yourself and the weights on a Sunday, and you're like, that I could do, that I could do. And there's also something you said for just being tired, like getting the
Yeah.
angst out. You like if look at if I'm anxious, or whatever's on my mind, work, stress, whatever. Everyone's got stresses in their life. You go to the gym and you train for 2 hours. Afterwards, getting that angst out, it's a little easier to deal with things when you've grinded and you feel tired and you're a little more at ease for sure. So I could see how that works. For yourself, for self coaching, have you ever dealt with another coach? Like, have you ever had another coach trying to do programming for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my high school coach, high school was a little bit weird. It's not kind of like how college collegiate lifting is. So we had like we were in off season kind of a sport. So we had like wrote the workout on the board. They didn't actually make sure we did anything. We didn't track our
Mm.
numbers or anything. My first year, like people were eating during our athletic period. And then, when I became a senior and I was like the captain of the team, I was like, absolutely not. Like we're actually lifting. So the dynamic there was a little bit different. So I don't know if technically I had a high school coach or not.
Wait a sec. Let me ask you about that. That's interesting. So, um, it was a class, like a period class,
Mhm.
and it was like a phys ed style that had lifting, and some people just didn't care to actually lift, so they just treated it like it was an off period,
Absolutely. Yep.
and they would be graded though on this, like they would still just get passing grades anyways, or just get no one cared, I guess.
Yeah, so it was an athletic period. So for a lot of us,
Okay.
we had like athletics as a scheduled period, and it was either first or last period. But I think for us, it was like second period. So it was a little weird. We had to get our schedules changed when we decided to do powerlifting, um, which worked pretty fine. That was okay. But I don't know how they did grading. Like I don't remember having a grade on my transcript for athletics. I probably did, but
They
yeah, no,
use
it
like
was
your
different.
SBD day. They're like, yeah, that's kind of weak.
Yeah, I don't even remember what our workouts were. I think our coach that was actually there because our technical high school coach was the assistant principal, so he couldn't be there during our period. He was just there
Mm.
for the meets on weekends and after school and stuff. So it was like a football coach that did our thing. He didn't know anything about powerlifting, so I think we were doing like cleans and stuff, but nobody actually did it. But it was a lot of like we just tried on our equipment and then like we just tried to hit depth or like we just tried to use a bench shirt and that was pretty much it. And then I did a lot of extra stuff outside of the period after school. So I guess that was like the beginning of my self coaching. I was just like going to the gym and just kind of doing whatever machines were open. And so I was just kind of figuring out. I think that was where I started to like connect some of my muscle like connection there, where I was like, okay, so if I
Mm.
do this, I feel it here. And then if I'm squatting, I feel the same muscle. So maybe I should keep doing this. So that I think was the very beginning. And then in college, it was different because we were on team programming in college. So technically, my president for the club was our coach there. That didn't end up working very well for me for very long. So my first actual coach was Joel Garza, who I'm still friends with now. He coached me up until I think 2021 Raw Nationals or Mega Nationals, whatever it was. So it was my first Raw National meet. And then after that, I got my degree and I said, okay, so he's still in his degree. I just got my degree. Like maybe I should just try to figure this out. Um, so that was like the beginning of my official like self-coaching journey was after Mega Nationals 2021. And then recently after the Arnold this year, I tried to hire another coach. And they're fantastic. They like the strategies that they were trying to use with me make so much sense. But I think because I had been self-coaching for so long, like the communication styles weren't a good match. And so it's just, and I think it would be very difficult for me to find a coach now that had it, the communication style that I need, because I don't really know what it is. So
Oh, fair enough.
self-coaching has been a whole journey. But yeah,
So,
so I was really upset when like the coach that I tried to have recently didn't work out because they're super intelligent. And I was like, I think like my brain just wants me to figure this out by myself.
I mean, yeah, first off, fair enough. I mean, if you yourself are like, look, it's not you, it's me. I don't even know what I
Yeah.
need right now. I'm still figuring out what the best way to communicate the program to me is. So when you were in high school and you became the captain, oh, you became the captain of the powerlifting team, was it?
Yeah, so it's like we didn't really have an official title because we were like this. I don't think our sport really took off until I was a senior, because then I was trying very hard and I was getting best lifter at all of these meets every week. And then they were like, oh, so if you try hard, like this is what happens. Like it's not that difficult to, win your meets and stuff. So after that, I think the team got big enough and they were more recognized and they actually appointed like a captain. So I was like an unofficial captain. I just like assumed
Mm,
the role. But yeah, I
gotcha.
yelled at everybody.
Really, and you were like, all right, this is stopping. We're gonna start actually lifting, and no kidding. So by the end of high school, did things start turning around for you a little bit? Like obviously you said you're still like drinking, et cetera, in college, but was it not quite like if we're walking through the high school years, was it getting better? Or, there were still difficulties, but at least you had some light at the end of the tunnel. We're like, okay, at least I know this is helping, but you're still dealing with things for sure.
Yeah, no. So after I found powerlifting in 2014, I think that 1 year was kind of difficult. So 2014 to 2015 was a little difficult still. But then after that, like 2015 and 2016, when I graduated, I did not drink. So I went down 2 weight classes over I guess I was in 3 separate weight classes over my time in powerlifting. The weight class that I was in when I graduated was 132. So I think that's 63. But
Right.
yeah, I was so on point. Like I did not know anything about nutrition, but I was like so obsessive about making sure that I only ate these things because at least I knew these things wouldn't cause me to gain weight and they had protein in them. I mean, it was turkey jerky, so it was like super processed, not great protein, but and I didn't know anything about macros at that time either. So I was just like, this is like a meat substitute, like that's great. I'm eating salad all the time, like I have a PB&J at this very specific time. So I think powerlifting, like over time, it created an environment for me to create all of these routines that I'd never had previously. Like all of
Mm.
those things that I had, I think, craved, powerlifting kind of gave me. Like you have to eat regularly or you're not going to feel great in the gym or you're going to be sore the next day. If you don't drink enough water, like your weight's going to fluctuate a lot. So these were things that I didn't really realize the significance of until, I was like halfway through my degree. But yeah, so life got way better by the end of high school. I think because things were changing and like high school ended, and then I was kind of waiting for college. I wasn't lifting quite as much at that point, and so drinking picked up again. And then in college, it was just so much overwhelm. Like having roommates in college has
Oh
always been
shit.
difficult for me. I've only had two
Frig.
roommates that I've ever like absolutely loved, and I lived with my sister for a point. But my current boyfriend and then Joel Garza was our roommate last year. So yeah, those two are the best roommates ever had. Um, yeah, the drinking in college I think came and went. So I had a pretty severe depressive episode when I was about a sophomore in college. That was the 1 year that I left powerlifting. The team, like UTSA, I left the team for a little bit. I was doing ROTC, but then they changed height and weight standards, and so I left ROTC, and then I was just kind of stuck. I was like, well, I don't have anything to do. Like, I don't have a routine. Like, there's nothing to do. And then Ashton Ruska is actually who let me back onto the team, and yeah, that was pretty much the new beginning. Ever since then, that was pretty much it.
Like so for a minute there, you didn't have powerlifting.
Yeah.
And considering everything powerlifting brought to your life in terms of structure, I mean, it gave you structure in every way, from knowing what you're going to do from day to day, to it helping in terms like, yeah, like you said, water intake, food intake, everything had meaning all of a sudden. Everything had a purpose. You could structure it all, and you had goals, and you felt. I mean, you found your voice. By the end of high school, you're literally taking a leadership role, and you're like, if you entering high school, you'd be like, look, I might be the last person who's going to start controlling the room. And by the end, you're like, all right, this is what we're doing. You felt
Yeah.
comfortable doing this. You found your space where you're like, I am comfortable here. As a matter of fact, I'm good. I'm like a special talent here. I'm winning best lifter, and people would look to me. So then in college, when you lose that for a moment, how scary was it? Where some people probably can't wrap their head around just what that they wouldn't know, would they?
No. So I think the best way I can kind of describe that loss of identity and like that loss of like I don't even know what the word for it is. Like everything just felt so out of control. And I know that like going to college, it was a good thing. And I hightailed out of the small town that I was in so fast. I was so happy to be out of there and to come to San Antonio. And I love UTSA. You know, I'm pursuing another degree there currently. But I think the best way I can kind of describe that in a way that makes sense to everybody is like I was so lost for finding something that I just fit well into that I changed my major 7 times. I had 7 official major changes, and they were all within the same like pretty small like science niche. So it was all similar things, but I changed it that frequently because I just could not find a spot where I just fit. So what I ended up doing is I picked the one degree that I think is the most aligned with like powerlifting. So I have my BS in kinesiology with an emphasis in exercise physiology. And in an undergrad, that didn't really align very well with performance for athletes. And my master's degree, I could have gone the performance route, but I'm actually going a different route, which I think is probably a better foundation for understanding powerlifting research later on. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, it was overwhelming. I was searching so hard to find a niche that I fit into, even when I had powerlifting, because powerlifting for everyone else wasn't quite that serious, if that makes sense. So I felt
Hmm.
really out of the picture and like out of the loop because I cared so much about it. And everyone was like, well, we're going to go out. Like, you can train, but we're all going to go out and do all of this, and you're going to be left out. And so I felt really like I felt like I needed to do some of these things that I was uncomfortable with that I didn't really realize that I was uncomfortable with. But you know, when you go out and you do all these things, you know, there's self-medication there that you have to do. So that's kind of
Hmm.
why the drinking began.
And this whole time, you didn't know why you were feeling like this. You were completely like the asking of the questions, like Leah would say, she'd be like, "What is wrong with me? Why?" And other people would ask, if other people like would ask you, you'd be like, "I don't know." Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be very, 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 very. I can't even imagine. And you were saying how, like at the worst of it, you weren't even sure if you'd make it out of high school.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Like,
probably the
how
lowest point.
was that in high school?
Yeah, people are just mean in high school. So, so
Right.
especially for my situation, there was a lot that went on in high school that I had no control over. And I think putting myself in some of the situations that I did in order to, you know, feel like I was part of some other group, you know, so I had friends. And I didn't realize that, you know, these people didn't actually, you know, want to be my friend. They were just there to like make fun of me. Um, that I think I eventually kind of realized that that's what it was. And I just did not really want to like believe that that's what was going on. So I just continued to self medicate. And it got to a point where it wasn't even just alcohol anymore. Like there were some other things that were going on. And I was just like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. So when I
Mm,
found powerlifting, some of the friends that I had that I think were going through pretty similar situations in high school, because my high school, I don't know how they function now, but back then it was like you're either in the group or you're out of the group. So, or you had to be, you know, there were very specific cliques. And I think that's normal for high school. But I never fit into a specific clique. Like we had kind of like an athlete clique, but the athlete clique was, they were part of other cliques. So I didn't really know where I fit in. So I tried to just kind of go along with, I think, whatever, you know, whoever invited me. So it was, that was pretty rough. And I'm unfortunately aware that that's actually kind of common for even people that aren't autistic if they just don't have interests that align with very specific groups of people, or you know something happens and then that group of people just dislikes you, like then you're just kind of stuck and you just have to get through it.
like how, I mean, they didn't know and they were kids and I get it. But
Yeah.
how, like, looking back now, if they knew, like, hey, this person was struggling and didn't know why, and you guys literally were picking on this autistic girl who's trying her heart out. Like, that's such a terrible story. Like, how difficult that would be for you to be, you have to put on a mask anyways for social interaction. For someone to like take advantage of this when you're trying, it's like that must have been terrible. And
Yeah.
freaking thank God you found powerlifting.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you know, frig. Do you think that's why? So this kind of going back to the coach saying, "I think this will help you out." Do you think he was seeing, not knowing that, like, obviously you didn't know yourself that you were autistic at the time, but did he think like this could give you something? You think he was, did he have any inkling that maybe you were struggling and he was trying to help you out, you think?
Oh, he knew I was having a hard time with like buying into it and like I don't know. He knew something was going on and he was trying to help me kind of figure it out, but I don't know if it was just because like that's not how I normally do things and so like I could not force myself to get on board with all of it. So I absolutely do not discredit how hard he tried, but I don't really even know exactly why I couldn't because it wasn't like we talked about things and then we fixed the program and then the programming was good and I was still, in charge of like the numbers and all of that. I don't really know exactly what part of it was really difficult for me, but clearly the arrangement itself was just really difficult. And I know that I had a really hard time, communicating like the recaps and things because I have like instantaneous feedback when I coach myself. So I'm like, oh, this
Hmm.
feels really off. Like maybe it's foot pressure or maybe, my feet were too wide and like I can self correct really, really quickly. But when you're doing, weekly check ins, like, and like, it's a phone call or like, I think talking in person is really, really difficult for me. And I prefer like when it's something analytical like that to just type everything out because then I can go back and reference it or I can fix it and, fine tune everything. So maybe that's what it was. And I realized that like for most people, like a person to person contact for like coaching, like being on the phone with them is really, really helpful. And it creates, this relationship between coach and athletes. Um, that I tried to maintain with my own athletes. I do voice memos now, so that's progress there. But
That's
unless I see
good.
them at
Yeah.
the gym, yeah, I don't really call most of them most of the time unless there's something that we need to discuss. But I think he was kind of under the impression that like that's his style of coaching, and
Hmm.
it just yeah, I didn't know that it wouldn't be a good fit for me until I just knew.
It's funny because like um most people pay extra for
Yeah,
like you know what I mean? It
yeah,
where you're like, listen to me. Again, like you wouldn't even know at the time to be able to articulate to him, like, it's not you, it's me. I actually don't, this isn't, it does the opposite for me. This is works in the opposite direction for me. It's better that if I read it, write it, whatever. This is how I take in information. This is best communication. But for other people, they might be like, she doesn't want to listen to me. She's not giving me
yeah,
time. They won't know. And yeah, I could see where like now looking back, probably throughout several relationships, people just wouldn't have understood. Just like even going
yeah,
back to competition day, where you'd be like, look at somebody who's used to being chatty on competition day with their competitors will come up to me and it won't be like that with me, and they will take it wrong. And it's like, it's not that. It's
yeah.
not that. Don't take it wrong. And at least now right? And you could it's easy for you. Look, first off, let me just say you are a really good speaker.
Thank you,
Ironically enough,
thank you.
whether or not you like this type of communication style, you're a phenomenal speaker and really good at articulating yourself. But when you got into powerlifting 2014-ish, because so much has changed. It's almost been 10 years, which is crazy. First off, time
Yeah.
is flying. Was it easier that it was somewhat a niche sport? I mean, I remember the social media was in its infancy at the time. Live streams, if there was a live stream, I remember trying to watch my friend who was in the Arnold Classic, and watching it meant seeing a score sheet that I clicked refresh and I could see if his attempt went green or red. And that's all I saw. There was no stream. It was just the score sheet either went green or red. Oh, he got the squat. Okay, cool. And then I'd see what the next number would be. So you came into powerlifting at a time when it was kind of like that. And
Yeah.
now it's developed and you've developed with it, which is probably good. So you could take it piece by piece and it's not overwhelming. But now you are on live streams that look like television. Social media goes throughout the entire world. I mean, you're on podcasts, like all of this is happening. In terms of, do you think it's when you first got into powerlifting, how do you think you would have felt if all of this was in place in 2014-15 range and it was like this? Do you think it's easier that you kind of grew with the sport growing? And how do you feel about all this, knowing that the bigger and better you get, you're winning all these titles? you're going to go to IPF. I mean, the IPF route, I don't got to tell you, there's going to be a lot of attention, the whole nine. How do you feel about all that?
It makes me extremely uncomfortable, particularly because I think me personally, like the reason why I don't really understand, when I need things or like, I kind of knew that I like to type things out and like send them. I don't like to ask for things. Like I don't want to single myself out and say like, hey, I need something different from everyone else. So for for some of the attention, it makes me uncomfortable. But I'm
Hmm.
definitely not going to let anybody know during the time. Like I'm just going to try to focus on, the one thing and just get through. Because I had a hard time with that. I think for the first Arnold that I did, that was a lot of attention, and I was like, oh my gosh, like people are expecting me to do things, and I don't know if I can live up to those expectations. But I think my own expectations for that meet were much higher than what probably should have been in front of me. But I think the older I get and the older my lifting age gets, like the easier that kind of is to tone out. So like there is a time to pay attention to it and buy into it and create some hype, for SBD, who is my sponsor. And then there is a time to kind of let that go and remember that, my training, I can't change my training. Like the training trajectory is going to go how it wants to go, and I have to just trust it, which I did a much better job with at nationals, considering I was struggling so much I couldn't even pull 341 off the ground, and then I pulled 479 on meet day. So I think that trust in just like the routine and like how everything is going, the more I understand that need that I have for it, the easier getting through like the attention of everything is. But when I started powerlifting, like I tried so hard to find the community. Like I was like, I want to do this. Like I want to do this long term until I can't do it anymore. Like I want to find other people who feel this way. And that might also kind of be why I had a really hard time with the transition from high school to college, because I could not find that community. So I was on Instagram and I was like searching powerlifter in the search bar, and like there were not that many things that were coming up except for like flashbacks to the 80s and stuff, which is really cool. But I wanted people that were my age that were into this. So I think now if you're younger and you're into the sport, like it is so easy to find a community. And especially like in my DMs, like if anybody's DMing me saying, they're in high school, like they just want to chat about stuff, like I do my best to, give them what they need and tell them that like this is a sport that I think is unlike most sports. Like there isn't really like a limit to the training age. Like, it's not gymnastics where, as soon as you turn 20, you're done. Or
Hmm.
like weightlifting where there's so much skill required and there's so much breakdown in the body that your lifting age is going to kind of dictate your career. Powerlifting is a much slower type of sport. So the longer you're in the sport, usually the more successful you are, unless you're just gifted at it. But you can either just be gifted at it, or you can take the time and get better at it over time, which is really cool. But I do kind of miss the spreadsheet. I will say that. So in high school with the projector and like the expo marker pens, hated that. Absolutely difficult to read, hard to track. Um, I know Wes Zunker, when I was working some meets for him really early on for high school season, he had like a Google Sheets program. So you could very clearly see and read everything, and things were red and green, and that was great. And then we got Lifting Cast. And Lifting
Hmm.
Cast, I prefer to watch over the live stream, if I'm being honest. The live stream is
Really?
something I tend to watch after, or like I'll pull the live stream up, but I also want Lifting Cast because the live stream is really cool, but I don't necessarily need to watch, people's reactions to lifting, or, if it's a tight race, like I might want to see how someone lifts it, but like I don't really buy into the show aspect myself. I just like to watch the numbers. But I think,
Wow, no kidding. So
yeah, I like to see.
when I described watching my friend the Arnold Classic, you're like, yo, I still watch it like that.
Yeah, oh yeah,
No,
I watch live streams on repeat. For me, I think like if I'm tired, like I'll just put, a Sheffield live stream on or like IPF World on.
but you were like this so powerlifting. Wow. No kidding. Is it like is it just in the background? Is it like it gives you a sense of ease or
It reminds me that if I don't put the work in now, and even if I'm tired, if I don't show up, those people on that TV behind me are going to kick my ass. So
wow, well,
it's some good
fair.
motivating, but it also reminds me that that's what I'm working towards. So like Sheffield Worlds, like nationals performances, like that's what it's about. So I do all of the work in here, and I think recently I'm having to remember that sometimes you have to actually try hard. things don't just like move the way that they used to. Because when I was younger, I didn't have to think about it. Things just moved how they were going to move. And now I think because I'm getting close to 10 years, like I have to mentally remind myself to actually try. So that's new. But having, meets on in the background where I want to be part of it at some point, that's a good reminder that like I need to remember to try because otherwise people behind me aren't going to have the same problem.
When you got in the game, was there lifters that you followed, look up to, etc.?
I had a hard time finding them. So I'm trying to remember I don't know who the first powerlifter I was that I followed. Who it was. It was probably a fitness influencer, if I'm being really honest.
Oh gosh.
It might have been Maddie Forberg.
Oh, no kidding.
It might have been. She might have been like the first actual power lifter that I had found.
Mm. And how about now? Do you now like, because you're into the powerlifting community? Do you have like people that, I don't know if the word like idolizes, maybe it's a little too strong of a word, but look up to, take inspiration from, or not really in powerlifting?
So it depends, I think, on where I'm at in training. So the old school, like equipped style of training and back in the day, with Jan Todd and all of that, like recently she's been like somebody that I look up to quite a bit because she currently works as a professor at the University of Austin. And so I'm doing some research for my thesis, and she comes up quite a bit in some of the powerlifting background of like actual published works, which is awesome. And I think powerlifting is one of those sports where there's like a really interesting intersect between people who are, pursuing higher education. They have PhDs, they have master's degrees, they're doing research in the field, but they're also really competitive and winning in the sport. So as far as like people that I really look up to, Chelsea Savitt, she's getting a master's degree in nutrition right now. She's already, she's been to Worlds. Claire
Mm.
Zai, who I think Claire Zai is probably like my favorite powerlifter right now.
Well, really,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I love her. I will be so excited to share a platform with her again. I think I'm looking forward to that more than actually competing as a 69 again. Um, there are so many, like Kristen Dunsmore too. I'm so excited. I'm ready for the return of Chloe Dublin, who is in med school, which is so cool. But I think, yeah, that's been a really interesting trend in powerlifting. So those tend to be the people that I really look up to, and I don't know if I would have even found that area, if I hadn't got to the level that I'm at and was like paying attention to, sciencey posts on like Instagram and like sort of navigated my way through.
And what you were saying too about it, when, because right now like you're hitting PRs, but how you'll feel maybe later on in life if you're not hitting PRs, etc. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger was on, I think, Logan Paul's podcast, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's like in his 70s now. And if you see him, like he's clearly on TRT, and my man's still jacked up. But Logan Paul was like, essentially, why are you still weightlifting? Why do you still train? Why do you still get up and train? And Arnold's like, because I'm not dead. I I wake up and I still have that. It doesn't leave you. I still have that ambition. I still want to get after it. It doesn't matter. Like the number on the weight is one thing that's good, but everything, like you said, Sunday I squat. Sunday I squat. Sunday I get after. There's something about discipline actually is a freeing thing. People think discipline's not. Consistency and discipline is a good thing. It feels
Yeah.
good to have structure, get after it, feel like you worked hard. There's nothing quite like after like 2.5, 3 hour gym session when you're like, I got after it today. There are times when I'm at the gym with a buddy and I look over to him, I'm like, yo, we're working hard today, huh? And he's like, yeah, we're in the middle of it. Like you're in the middle of it with your boy. Like, you get in there, and if you're taking turns or whatever, and you're like, fuck, we're grinding right now. And there's something about that feeling. And when Logan Paul asks, like, why do you still do it now in your 70s? Arnold's like, why do I not deserve to have that feeling? Because I'm in my 70s. Why
Yeah.
would I not? What do you think? You just stop wanting things in life as you get older? Like it just turns off and you're like, I'll just sit around on the couch and be depressed. Like life goes on. You keep
Yeah.
going. You keep after it. There's no reason you have to stop. I mean, if you've got to work things around to certain injuries or whatever. But yeah, I totally get it. And adding the element of coaching, like how when did you start deciding that you want to do coaching, and how has that been in terms of just everything? Even like articulating to your athletes and taking feedback in and that development. How did that start, and how's that development been going?
So I actually did not take any official athletes on that paid me until after I got my degree. I had quite a bit of imposter syndrome. I think in the beginning, I was like, well, I haven't done this, I haven't done XYZ. I don't have as many years of experience as these other coaches. I'm, not great at wanting to do, these big like social media campaigns where I'm advertising for myself. And I kind of still don't do that. It's more so like if like people know what they want. So if I'm going to be really open about like what we provide and like my coaching style and like just kind of let my athletes do their thing, like people are going to reach out and ask if they kind of like that style. And some people don't, and that's totally fine. And we probably wouldn't work very well together anyway. But I took my first few athletes, and I still have them. They paid me $20, and I told them straight up, I was like, okay, so we're gonna kind of figure this out as we go. And they were most of them were equipped at the time, so I was just kind of like, so this is what works for me. Like I think this is how things are gonna go, and I still to this day, equipped coaching is not as scientific as I want it to be because of the nature of what it is.
Hmm.
It is way more variable than raw lifting, and that's really difficult for me to coach because I want to have that kind of data to look back and analyze later. Um, but I think trying to get out of the imposter syndrome and prove that, like, I've been coaching myself for so long. If I can figure it out for myself, it's going to take, lots of communication, and like I need to at least have these tools ready to go for these athletes to make sure that like while we're figuring it out, we can actually do that together. But I think the biggest part of like coaching and like getting out of that syndrome is making sure that the athletes I have are actually a good fit for me and my coaching style. I think really early on that was something I didn't prioritize, and I kind of wish that I had. But I mean, when you're first starting out, like you don't really get to pick. Whoever's like,
Right.
yeah, I want you to coach me. Let's get some experience. Like you're just gonna take them. But I think the older I get and like the longer I coach, the more tools I have, the more resources are available now with like powerlifting now and 3DMJ and all of that. Like there are just so many resources. But if you're brand new, and at the time I wasn't aware of any of this. So I was going off of like, some of the things I learned in my degree and personal experience and what other people were talking around me. And I had some theories and stuff. And I think now there's like an actual coaching community for powerlifting. So it's a lot easier to just kind of like exchange ideas and, either validate or make you think of a different way of doing something. And it's been really, really cool. But I think coaching wise, sometimes you just have to do it. Like if you just start and realize that you're gonna have to learn and change things as you go, I think it'll be more than fine. But it was really hard to get over imposter syndrome first. That first bout of imposter syndrome.
I 100% get it because I mean, there's so many phenomenal coaches out there, but I guarantee all of them at some point have gone through that. I remember even like Jason Tremblay, Taylor Atwood, like the strength guys. He's been on here. I mean, back in the day when he first started, he started with Taylor of all the people. And Taylor was like hyped, had all this hype around him, had all this potential, obviously, bombs out at the Arnold Classic. And I remember Jason's like, oh my God, like, and Jason, who is like the total average Joe dude, was dressed in like, I forget how he said he dressed, but he dressed up for it. And this isn't Jason to like try to draw attention to himself or whatever. Like, he is not that dude. So he's trying to almost be something he wasn't. And and then Taylor bombs out and you're second guessing yourself. And he's coming from, I believe, the bodybuilding world into powerlifting. So even guys like him who ended up with Leah Bavoil, Taylor, whatever the heck, like the roster, everybody goes through this, the imposter syndrome. And I mean, I listen to whatever podcast, even guys like the most like freaking Joe Rogan talks about imposters. Everybody deals with imposter syndrome at some point. It's not always a bad thing to
Yeah.
because it forces you to audit yourself and it opens you up. Now, some people, when you feel imposter syndrome, how you react to it, if you get insecure about it to the point where you're like, I need to pretend I know everything now. Nobody knows everything. What do you like? That's, but some people, when they feel insecure, I have to pretend. So if someone asks me a question, like I'm not going to say like, I'm not sure. I'm going to ask somebody else or let me research this or whatever. I'm just going to fire from the hip, giving answers, whatever. And you could go down certain paths where it's like, some people are getting into nutrition when they're not nutrition coaches and stuff. And some people are getting into it's like, all right, are you trying to do everything? Or, and other times, if you feel it, you're like, you do the opposite. You start reaching out and trying to figure it out by reaching out to other people and problem solve it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's common. It's funny you weren't asking people to pay money or anything like that, but whatever you have your data points off of this. Those
Yeah.
people ended up being key data points for yourself, as well as like yourself being an athlete. It helped huge. This is something actually going back to Jason Tremblay. He said it was very difficult getting over the hump because he wasn't an athlete in powerlifting. So it was imperative that he had got at least one athlete over the hump to make it, quote unquote, make it, air quotes. So he could be like, there, I proved myself there. And to get the ball rolling. Whereas if you yourself are an athlete and you're self coaching, you have yourself if you can make it. You could get over the hump and be like, I could do it. I did it.
Yep.
I actually did it. I got one. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying about putting yourself out there in advertising coaching. People, I mean, just like anything, people need to know if you are coaching or you're not, and who have you brought from scratch up to what levels, etc. And it helps if you have yourself, but and you do, and you've made it, and you've won two USAPL titles. But yeah, I totally get it. Where I keep using Jason Tremblay's example. He just fits, but he also was like, I'm not a marketing guy. He's
Yeah.
talked to me about it as well. I'll be like, I am not that dude. At some people, it's natural for them to hit. They take the social media so easy. Like a guy like Russell Orhe, it's like just normal.
Yeah.
It's just normal for him, or whatever. They make posts like a Leah Bavoil or whatever. They make posts and they just know how to do it. It just comes intuitively. Where for other people, it's like, I don't enjoy necessarily doing all this, that, and the other, but it is literally marketing for what we do.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line and a balance, right? But
Oh yeah, for sure.
at least with your athletic pursuits, it almost takes care of itself, ironically,
Yeah,
as
for
good as
sure.
you are.
For sure. And my first self-coaching like prep was Arnold 2022. So the fact that
Oh,
I got
really?
second, I was like, yeah, because I did 2021 with Joelle. And then after that, that off season, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to do this myself. So
Mm.
it's been I feel like it's been longer than that I've self-coached, but I guess it's only been, 2.5 years.
Yeah,
Year and a half? I guess
year
so.
and a half, yeah, long enough. I mean, it's a sample size, anyways. I mean, things have been going well. Um, in terms of, I remember reading some of your captions, and you were actually saying, like, for your USAPL two titles, and you're beating like Sam Calhoun, Jen Thompson. These are legends in the game, but you had thought you were underperforming, and you have potential for more. So, why do you think you had underperformed, and we haven't seen Gabby Martinez full potential yet? Do you think is that coming around the corner? Is that coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I think next weekend will probably be the first meet that falls together. I think what ends up happening is when I get too caught up in the competition aspect of it, is I start to mess with kind of like the way that my programming is. Not necessarily like the program itself would change necessarily, but like the numbers that I pick. So I think I'm like
Mm,
overreaching a little bit too early. So then the peak just kind of falls in on itself. But also like the underperforming thing, I think is like me getting overstimulated and just so exhausted by the time that I get to deadlift. Or like on bench where, you know, like the pressure, like bench is where the pressure of the meet hits me because everything's quiet and I can pay attention. On squat, I'm just trying to focus on like quelling my anxiety because the first squat is, I think, for most people, like the most stressful lift of the entire meet. Once you get the first squat done, then you're good. You're in the game. So, yeah, I don't think I've had that performance yet where it's like, okay, this is what she actually had, not that something went wrong. And those are things that I'm very slowly starting to collect and put together and figure out how to, kind of avoid so that I can actually have a good meet and actually put on the platform what's come from training. So I'm really excited. And I think actually the less serious I get about a prep, the better prep goes. Like this prep was not supposed to be, you know, big. Like prep for nationals, I did not put pressure on myself. I was like, we'll just kind of go with, whatever. And, not a good day. It matched exactly what I hit last year. 2 days later, maxed out in the training hall and put, 12 and a half keys on my total. So I'm
You hit
excited. I've
540,
kind of,
right?
huh?
In that you hit 540, right?
Yeah.
And for people listening, I mean, if you're going as a 69 kilo lifter, you could eat a little more. If you gain a little size, that 540 becomes 550, start doing the numbers. We're talking, you're up there. You're in
Yeah.
the conversation with it, like the elite of the elite 69s like Carola, Garra, Leah Bavoil. I mean, this is going to be an interesting run, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm super. I've been waiting for Carola to come back raw. Like I know she had her, she wanted to go win her medals for equipment because she's the best in both. Like let's just be completely real. She is the best in both. But I'm super excited. She I think was around because I think when Leah Bavoil came in third, I think that was the first IPF Worlds that I looked at the results. Like I don't think I had like I wasn't watching anything on Instagram or like any hype into the meet. I think that was just the first one I looked up. So her name's been something that I've been keeping an eye on for a while. So I'm super excited. And I think for any weight class, like if I were going to go up or down any weight class, I'm really glad that like Leah and Carola are like the two that hopefully they stay 69. So like that actually goes down. But those are, I think, the two people that I would want to compete with because I think those two are just awesome. So it's kind of like when I competed with, Claire and Sam, like those are just people that I like to be around. And I think that they're great people. So competing with them is so much more fun than if I'm competing with people that I don't necessarily like.
What was why did you decide to cross over from USAPL and go the PA/IPF route?
So that is along the lines of me choosing to allow myself to be selfish and to chase things that I actually want. Um, Personally, though, the USAPL is just kind of not, they're not hitting the marks on what I want. And I have reached out and have tried to kind of do what I can to salvage my interest in the federation because there are so many people that are tied to that federation that I respect and admire so much. The vice president of the USA Powerlifting is somebody that has seen me compete from, regionals in high school all the way till now. My last USAPL meet that I did a couple weeks ago, push pull meet, that was his meet. And, he ran my regionals in high school. So, and, it's, it's difficult. I struggled, I think, with the fact that maybe leaving is something that I actually want. And I struggled with that because I don't want to stir up a fuss. I don't want people mad at me, but this is something that I want. Like this is something I need to do, where there's always going to be the what if. And I don't want to steal that from myself because getting to Worlds is such a big event. Opportunities for that aren't going to be there like for my entire career. Something may happen. I just don't want to spend the money to go to Worlds. I may never win another national. Somebody comes out of nowhere. I may have to go down or up a weight class to try, and it's just not going to be there anymore. So I think while there is an opportunity for me to get there, I have to take it. I already kind of robbed it of myself 1 year. So I think it's just time for me to just go all in and just be selfish and just do it. And then if it ends up affecting my coaching way more than I think it will, then that's a conversation that I'll have to have with myself later. But for right now, we've got lots of things in place so that everybody's taken care of and I can still pursue this as well.
Yeah, so a couple things. For sure, you can't live your life for someone else.
Yeah.
Like if someone else is going to be disappointed or someone else is going to hold this against you, it's like you can't live my life for you. I mean,
Yeah.
this is if my dream is to be a world champion in a sport, and possibly that punches a ticket to Sheffield on top of that. Like the fallout from what can happen if you go this route. And to not do that to please somebody else
Yeah.
would be a shame. Can you imagine being older, looking back and be like, I let that door close on my window of opportunity for somebody else
Yeah.
because they felt better if I didn't? That's that. I mean, no, that would be a regret. You're doing the right thing. You have
Hope
to,
so.
yeah, for sure. And the other thing in terms of Article 14, man, that's got to get cleaned up. That's got to get cleaned up. I'm hopeful it will. But I think a lot of parties want this thing cleaned up in terms of it not impacting coaches and
Yeah.
people being able to coach, etc. So let's see what happens with all of that. We'll put a pin in it.
Okay.
I know it's like an ongoing fluid thing in the background. So we'll see what happens with all of that. But so you essentially, is it just the goal of being like a world champion, Sheffield, and all the rest of it? Is that what the allure is? Where you're like, I want to be at the world championships. And have you been watching the world championships? Because they're getting wilder and wilder. The sport is blowing up. 400,000 views on the Olympic channels, YouTube. Millions of people across Eurosport all over Europe are watching it. Like the sport is freaking blowing up on the IPF side. Um, so I mean, being a world champion is going to be super duper cool if anyone who wins that title or just being there
Yeah.
is insane. I've been to every world since 2016. I'm telling you, Gabby, it's everything you want it to be. But I mean, it's an amazing experience. But is that really what you alluded to, that like that you want? Is that world's experience, possibly a world title, etc.? Or was like the Sheffield impacted, or did you want it before Sheffield even?
Yeah. So Sheffield is something I don't know if I want to do.
Oh,
Sheffield is
really?
kind of I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get invited to Sheffield, but Sheffield is very much so like the USAPL production, just like amplified and it's more refined. So I'm a little bit nervous about kind of like what that is. So I'm kind of, if it happens, that'll be something that I need to take some time to decide because it would be so awesome to even get there. But to get there to do a meet that's, that is a show. And it's not necessarily about, the head to head competition, it's about the show, which is really cool for the sport. And I loved watching Sheffield and the matchups and all of that. But personally, I don't know if that's something that I'm ready for. So Sheffield wasn't like the main draw for me. It's really cool, but because it's really cool, I don't know if like when I get there, it will be something that I can handle. If that makes sense.
No,
But
it makes sense from everything you explained earlier about.
it's
I get
really
it.
cool though. So
Yeah,
once
I got you.
maybe.
I follow what you mean. Where you said
Yeah.
like USAPL Nats a little overwhelming at times. Sheffield, yeah. Look at I was you had said when you're trying to calm down and you feel overstimulated, you could feel the music. At Sheffield, I kid you not, I could feel like even if I had noise canceling on my ears, the music was I could feel it reverberating in my chest. And when people were chanting, when Jesus came out and he was gonna pull and like make history, and they started chanting Jesus, Jesus, 2,000 people packed in there started chanting it. I could feel their chants, like because the sound is reverberation in my body. And I was like, it was so overwhelming for me. So with everything you described, um, in terms of what you deal with, yes, I get it. It's like where you be like, hey guys, not you, it's me, but that might be a difficult one. But sorry. So going back to IPF Worlds though.
Yeah, so I think international competition has been something I've been interested in since I've like first started sports when I was about 5. So the goal was always to, be the best of the best, go to the Olympics for whatever sport that I was doing. So, I'm totally fine with the fact that the IPF is not in the Olympics. Totally cool with it. I realize that the Olympics is like a whole other bureaucratic tape that most athletes have to juggle and try to figure out how to get through because it's just so much elongated. For powerlifting, I think we would be a little bit different just because it's a longevity sport anyway. But totally fine. I think it's really cool that we have it once a year, and it is like that is the biggest meet of the year for powerlifting. I mean, before Sheffield anyway. So, I mean, like the goal before powerlifting was to go to the Olympics for softball. Softball is no longer the Olympics, so that actually ended up working out pretty well anyway. So I think the draw of international competition and competing with people around the world that are just as into this sport as I am has always been the allure. And the fact that I've now won a national title in the USAPL twice, and both times it was because the best of the best were in another federation, that kind of hurt. So that's also part of why I was like, my performance underperformed. Like, I didn't even match what the national champ in the other federation did. You know, it doesn't count to me. If you're not going to be the national champion and have like the heaviest total for that weight class across feds for like, you know, the US, you can't really call yourself a national champion. So I take those titles, you know, it's part of the resume. It's cool and all, I have the medals, but they don't mean as much to me as I wanted them to mean. If that makes sense. The first one, that meant a lot, but I knew it was because Chandler wasn't there.
I totally get it. I mean, that's a lot of you competitors have that drive where you want to face
Yeah.
the top end competition. And for the world championships, it's special. You know how few people are ever going to experience what you're going to experience? Being a sport representing your nation at the world championships, and you're not just showing up. You, you're a medal favorite with women from all over the world. Italy, France, whatever. Like to your point, as long as they like obviously Carola is a 63, but she'll be going a 69 for Sheffield. So we'll see what
We'll
happens in the
see.
future. But yeah, it is a special moment and getting to test yourself against the best of the best. And I'm going to be there in Houston. So that'll be cool. We'll be in real life. And I'm excited for everybody crossing over because yourself and a lot of big names are crossing over and we'll see the pathway and how it all ends up. What do you think your top? Do you have any goals in mind in terms of numbers? Or are you just going to let this thing fly and see what happens?
So I do have some numbers in mind, and I was debating on if I wanted to talk about them, but you know, why not? It's a local meet. If I end up just deciding to qualify, then you know, big shocker, nationals is going to be in March. I can show up there, and I will absolutely need to show up if I want to take first at nationals. Um, so I hit a 196 as my like top fatigue single for this block. It was a fatigue single, so it was after 407 or 185 for three. So knowing that, I think 200 is probably there, but I think
Hmm.
realistically, I'm going to aim for 197. For bench has been a little bit iffy since I was having some shoulder issues. I think even before bench depth became like something I needed to worry about. So I'm just going to guess that like 117 is probably going to be there. And then for deadlift, I would love to load 501. The 227 and a half, that's something that I want. Because if I can pull 225 after another fatigue single and a top triple, I think 227 after bench and squat will be, I think it'll be there and it won't be as hard as I'm thinking.
What's that total added up?
That is 542 and a half.
And you've done 540. So it could be there. And in terms of because it's a 69 kilo class, and obviously there's no cutting or anything, are you changing anything at all? Are you planning on like bulking a little bit and cutting into or anything like that? Or you just like, look at I could walk in there, I don't have to change anything.
So I'm probably going to water load the day before, but I'm not going to worry about like cutting a whole lot. I've been walking around right at about 70 kilos between 69 and 70. I do typically walk around between 69 and 70 anyway. So I'm kind of hoping that this week, as I increase water intake all week, I won't really have to worry about it too much. I'll just get to wake up and go weekend because it's on Sunday too, which is really, that always makes it a lot easier when it's not on Saturday and I have to travel on Friday. So
So yeah, same. So you were when you were doing 67.5, you were the same body weight, but you had to cut more.
yes, so usually for 67, I cut pretty early on. So I'm usually walking around at like 68, 68 and a half because I don't like to do heavy cutting like the month of. Like I do not want to have to worry about water cutting. For this nationals, I did, and it was only a kilo, so it's not like I had to like spit a whole lot. I was spitting in the hallway just in case because I was like, I do not want to go reweigh in afterwards.
Yeah.
And it worked out okay. But yeah, 69 is probably a lot easier of a weight class for me than 67.
I mean, there's nothing like having to cut all those times. You're like, this time it's like a kilo and a half doesn't sound like a lot. It's enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's enough. That's what, 3.5 pounds of not having to dehydrate. That'll affect performance. That can make a difference for you all of a sudden, where you're like, oh, wow, I feel a heck of a lot better come competition day. Um, so we'll see what happens. Talking about Sheffield, actually, who do you think's going to win the battle between Carola Garra and Leah Bavoil? And first off, how freaking amazing is that show? Listen, for like, I can't, it's such a good showdown. The reigning 63-kilo world champion against the reigning 69-kilo world champion, and they're both 1-1 against each other. Unfinished business, two multiple time world champions, both reigning world champions going head to head. I mean, this might be the biggest, like, it's one of the most hype showdowns. I'm so excited to watch it. And it's in your weight class. So you're probably like doubly interested.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this showdown? How excited are you to watch it? What do you think's going to happen here?
So I'm super excited to watch this because I don't think I've ever seen Carola struggle on a squat. I have no idea where her top end squat is. And I haven't watched like her open power, so I haven't pulled that up yet, but I don't know when the last time she failed squat was. So I'm kind of curious to see if like it's gonna dictate who wins that showdown by who out squats who. Because Carola's
Mm,
got the bench, obviously, and then Leah's got the deadlift. So I think on squat, that's going to kind of be like who gets what. So I'm super excited, and I really hope that Carola stays 69. I know that she is like a 63, and Leah can go back and forth between either one, but I think them both having like so much room to like grow into, and like it just I'm so excited. But I also know that Leah was injured at Sheffield, or like she had just gotten over an injury and she
yeah.
wasn't sure. So I have no idea where her stuff's gonna end up.
And at
So it could
Worlds,
be that like
obviously,
I mean, it could be either way where after squats, we know for sure who's winning and who's not. So,
and after at Worlds, obviously, she purposely wasn't breaking the record.
oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's such a good flipping showdown. I mean, literally flip a coin who's going to win that one. Because you're right, Garra looked amazing at Worlds, and she's
Yeah.
got more gas in the tank after Worlds. Like, she could have kept going.
Yeah.
Garra is for like a minute there. I think people forgot just how good she is. For a minute there, like, she won in 2019, then she went into Equipped, and Equipped doesn't get the love and attention. And she was at the World Games, which is once every 4 years, which, by the way, is going to be Raw.
I heard.
And you wanted the Olympics, multi-sport. I don't know if you see much of the World Games. If you have like multi-sport opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, all these different nations and all these different, there's an athlete compound like the Olympics, and it's freaking like it's huge too. And it's gonna be raw. And I believe if you make the podium, you're going. And and that's for 2025, and you're coming just in time. So if your goal is the Olympics, you might, I mean, not yet. Who knows? Maybe we get the Olympics at some point. But the World Games would be a freaking phenomenal experience for you too. After everything else, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, so sorry. Going back to my point, people forgot about Garra because she went in Equipped route. She went to World Games, and won world titles in Equipped. And when she came back, I think she surprised some people.
She
It was
definitely
kind of
did.
like, y'all must have forgot, as they say, like, she's up there with, yes, she is up there with Leah. People are thinking like Leah's got this, like Leah might win, sure, but this is a flip of the coin. She
Yeah.
might not. This is legitimate. Like, I don't know who's going to win this. And now after the world's performance, I think Garra reminded people, like, I am her. Yes, I
Yeah.
am her.
For
you
sure.
know?
For sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it and see what the heck happens there. So I got a couple questions. We've been look at man, this has been a freaking hour, 40 minutes, easy peasy lemon squeezy. This is a really good conversation. I'm glad I had you on. We got to do this again, by the way. I got a couple questions. These ones are easy questions. About your favorite food, movie, and music, just to get a little bit about you outside of powerlifting. What is your favorite food?
That is a good question. Probably sesame chicken.
Oh, really?
Every
I
time
would not
somebody
have
asks
picked
me what
that.
I want, like after a meet, it's always like Chinese food, but I always want specifically sesame chicken.
I was gonna say you look like a sesame chicken girl. That's it. But yeah, all right, cool. And how about your favorite music and possibly musician, the artist?
That's a question I have a hard time with. So I did just drive to the Rio Grande Valley, which is about 4 hours from my house. And the entire way it was just Disney music. So from like
Disney.
the good Disney movies from like the 90s.
Ah, I like how you stress that. The good ones, like what? Like, are we talking like Lion King and is that
Oh yeah.
era?
Like
Yeah,
Lion
yeah,
King,
yeah.
Hercules, Mulan, like that era of Disney. So I
Okay.
don't think I have like a favorite genre, but I mean if I'm in a car for 4 hours, that's probably what I'm putting.
And how about movie and actor actress?
So my favorite movie is probably the Harry Potter series. I don't think I ever get tired of watching those, or probably specifically like the 1997 Hercules, the Disney movies.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I relate so much to that movie, both because like he's strong, but also because like he's on this whole journey of like finding where he fits in, and I relate to that personally. But as far as like actors, maybe Emma Watson.
I was gonna say because she's in Harry Potter. What has she
She's
been
just
doing?
so elegant.
She is. Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Has she been in movies lately? She probably hasn't. I just haven't seen it. But I haven't seen her in a minute, right?
I don't think so. If she has, I don't typically pay attention either. My boyfriend is in charge of like all of the movies and the music in our in our house. I'll just sit there and watch whatever he puts on.
Fair enough. Let me ask you. So you were saying how like with everything you are now and everything you've accomplished, and the doors that are opening for you in terms of going the PA route, the IPF route, and everything, and now you're a coach, and now you know. Obviously, there's so much more of the story, so many more chapters that are left to go. But now that you know, you start seeing your pathway and how you've developed as an athlete, as a person, and where you are now in your late 20s. What would you tell Gabby Martinez, who is in high school? What would you tell that girl when she was at the darkest points?
I would tell her to take up space and that it is okay to demand space. Because I think that's probably why I was in the darkest point anyway. I didn't know how to tell people I was uncomfortable. I didn't know why I was uncomfortable. And I think had I had more confidence in myself as a person and not just try to fit into what everyone else around me was expecting of me, I think I probably would have found not necessarily the same success early on, but I think it would have led to like my collegiate career probably would have been way more productive as far as lifting because it didn't really take off for me. And from like the first year, they were like, oh, yeah, okay, she's kind of strong. And then the last year, they're like, oh, yeah, that's hers. So, like, I think maybe if I had come in with more of like that sense of security in myself, it probably would have been way more consistent throughout the whole thing. And I probably wouldn't have also had a similar low point in college either. So, but also, I think what most people tell their younger selves is that it gets better. So, you just got to keep going.
Who, who knows what the future is going to be for you? 36-year-old Gabby might be telling you, like, oh, it got way better. Wait until you see what's about to happen. Who knows? Listen, thank you for coming on the podcast. You got to do more of these. Like, you're a really good talker and you're really good at explaining yourself and articulating. And Frank, I'm going to see you soon. I'll see you in
Oh, yeah.
Houston.
See you
We'll
next week.
start the journey. The journey begins for the IPF route. So thank you for coming on and let everybody know before I let you go how they can contact you if they want coaching.
So we have the Built Different Athletics Instagram. There is a link to the info, like the form that we have, or you can DM me personally and I'll send you the form as well. Also, give me a couple of days to respond to your DM.
Fair enough. All right. And everybody listening, as per usual, please do subscribe, give us high ratings, post it up in your stories. And if I see it, I will repost it. And Gabby, thank you for coming on. We're
Thanks for
gonna have to
having me.
do this again. And until next time, six pack Lapadat, six up, and we are out.